President obviously under fire for asking Ukraine and China to investigate the son of former Vice President Joe Biden, one of his top political rivals for re-election. As a hypothetical, just because I think there are a lot of people concerned about the precedent this is setting, would you have found it acceptable if, ahead of the 2012 election, then President Obama had asked a foreign leader to investigate one of Mitt Romney's sons? Would that be okay with you?
Well, I think if the corruption involves a former vice president or a former president, an administration official, rooting out corruption in other countries was something that Democrats thought they were doing with the Mueller investigation. They were pushing hard for
there's no evidence
of
corruption in this. There's no evidence of corruption in this case.
Well, other than the vice president bragging in front of a video camera about holding up $1 billion worth of military assistance to Ukraine unless or until such time as they call off an investigation into his son's
that's not what happened,
relationship with a gas company.
Sir, but that's not what happened. I guess my question is, do you think it's appropriate for a politician to use his position in foreign policy to push a foreign leader to investigate a political rival? It's just a yes or no. Is it appropriate or is it not appropriate?
Well, if the political rival happened to have been the vice president of the United States and this corruption was being investigated even prior to his bringing it up, and by the way, it's not like Donald Trump has been exactly covert about this. There's great integrity in his authenticity, which is something that people out here in the heartland appreciate about him. So he has these discussions in wide open. He released the entire transcript of this supposed phone call that supposedly had all of this quid pro quo, which once again proved to not be true. There was no quid pro quo in the phone conversation. So no doubt that the haters are going to hate, and they're going to try to create this narrative for forever and ever, but ignore the fact that for 2.5 years we had to endure a Mueller investigation or a Russian collusion investigation that proved to actually exonerate the president.
I don't know that it exonerated him, but beyond that, I'm just talking about this precedent that a lot of people are concerned about, and in terms of the quid pro quo, I don't think it's been established that there was no quid pro quo. You're just asserting that there isn't one. I certainly think it's worth investigating, don't you?
Well, if it is, then it's certainly worth investigating whether Hunter Biden used his status as the son of the vice president to fly around the world on Air Force Two and gaining all kinds of government contracts and positions with companies that he has no qualifications to serve for, and getting a large paycheck as a result of it. So maybe it's all worthy of investigation.
Are you really not capable of answering a question about whether or not it's acceptable for a president to ask a foreign rival to investigate his political rivals, to ask a foreign nation to investigate his political rivals, without bringing up Hunter Biden? I'm not defending Hunter Biden getting these gigs. I'm just saying, can you say that this is a precedent, and now in American foreign policy it's going to be okay for a Democratic president to push China or Russia or whatever to investigate the children or the family of his political rivals? Is this now the country we're going to live in?
Well, I would say this much, Jake. I appreciate that we have a president who's very transparent about his opinions, and he's very clear about them. He doesn't try to do it covertly. Now, is he pushing them to do it? I don't get the sense that he's pushing them to do it at all. I think he talks, he thinks out loud, he expresses whatever's on his mind, and people can take that and twist it any way they want to.
If you're wondering what it looks like for a United States senator to be physically incapable of saying that asking a foreign country to open an investigation into an American citizen for the express purpose of interfering in an election is wrong, look no further than North Dakota's Kevin Cramer. I mean, the guy cannot bring himself to even acknowledge this blatant crime, and it is a crime, without instead pivoting to Hunter Biden. And to be clear, right off the bat, for the umpteenth time, Hunter Biden did nothing wrong. He's been investigated and adjudicated. Joe Biden wasn't pushing for the Ukrainian prosecutor's ouster to protect his son. He was joining the Obama administration and the European Union and international bodies and anti-corruption advocates in Ukraine and around the world to oust a prosecutor for not pursuing corruption. That's the entire story. There is not and never was any crime. So when Kevin Cramer and the rest of Trump's desperate sycophants show up on cable news shows perpetuating a debunked claim, they're proving just how much they're willing to contract their dignity to the White House. And it is a lot. But the fact is that Cramer's not even unwillingness, but physical incapability to acknowledge Trump's criminal behavior without instead deflecting to Hunter Biden is a tacit acknowledgement of his guilt. That Kramer can't bring himself to defend a single thing Trump did, that he can only deflect, is not only a pretty terrible strategy, but it says more about Trump's guilt than if he'd even tried to defend him. I don't know about you, but Your Honor, my client is totally innocent because Hunter Biden is bad is not a defense I'd jump at during a trial. And Kramer goes on to praise Trump for not being covert.
And by the way, it's not like Donald Trump has been exactly covert about this. There's great integrity in his authenticity, which is something that people out here in the heartland appreciate about him.
But that's not by design. Trump got caught asking for a quid pro quo because of a whistleblower. And the guy even tried to lock down all records of his call by putting them in a secure server, despite his conversations with Zelensky containing no sensitive information from a national security standpoint. He wasn't covert, he was just so glaringly indiscreet with his corruption that a whistleblower exposed his crimes. And then he only released the summary of the call because an impeachment inquiry was opened, and withholding it was going to be evidence of obstruction of justice. In other words, the only shred of transparency came because his back was against the wall. So for Kramer to praise him for being transparent is an absolute joke. He finishes by trying to absolve Trump by claiming that any involvement by Ukraine or China or Russia was of their own free will and that Trump never pushed them to do it.
Now, is he pushing them to do it? I don't get the sense that he's pushing them to do it at all.
Only he completely disregards the fact that Trump withheld military assistance that had been allocated to Ukraine by Congress. He then took a phone call with Ukrainian President Zelensky, asked for the favor of investigating Joe Biden, to which Zelensky agreed, and then Trump released the aid, along with an additional $140 million. So if you mean to tell me that withholding aid that Ukraine needed to counter Russian aggression in the immediate aftermath of Russia invading and annexing their sovereign country wasn't a form of pressure, then you are either speaking in complete bad faith or you really shouldn't be a United States Senator. The fact is that these constant deflections to Hunter Biden, who, again, is not a legitimate scapegoat for Trump's own criminal behavior, don't help the president's cause so much as make him look even more guilty. And every effort by Republicans to help him is just rendering them complicit in what will inevitably prove a completely lost cause.